a little reminder that we're recording now. So, okay, welcome everyone. Let's get started. We're going to switch to sharing our screen, which is now not giving me what I wanted. So let's try this again. Let's make sure we can do this. I've been practicing this part. Practicing and practicing. Why is it coming up with my meetings? Okay. All right. Just not wanting to cooperate because even though I really tried really hard.
So do you think they can see it?
No, they will. Here we go. Yes, this is the one. Hopefully you're seeing our template come up on the screen. And now we can start the slideshow. Okay, has everybody got that? Is that showing up for everyone? Fantastic. So,
Oh, good.
Welcome, everyone. This is our webinar on strategies and tools to help your neurodivergent and or anxious kids. And we know that they often go together. This is their transition to high school. Just for now, let's mute the mics. And if you could stack up your questions for later in the webinar, because as you've just seen, Ruth and I are not the most proficient at Zoom. So even if you put things in the chat, we're probably not going to get to it until the end anyway. So we're looking forward to hearing from you. Before we start, we would like to start with a land acknowledgement, which is to acknowledge that we are fortunate to live, work, and play on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Tawasan, Musqueam, and other Coast Salish peoples. And our goal in this is to acknowledge and honor the Indigenous people who have lived on and cared for this land since time immemorial. Thank you. So, on to some introductions. I lost the bet, so I'm going first. So, hi, I'm Fiona, Fiona Scott, and this is my lovely colleague, Ruth Germo. Thank you so much for joining us and talking about the things that we need to consider for your kids. I'm an RCC, a registered clinical counsellor, and my special interest is in neurodiversity and adolescence. I've lived in Delta for 15 years, just moved to Ladner. I have 2 adult neurodivergent children myself. I've navigated secondary school with both of them, and I also had my own challenges through secondary school and my own neurodivergence. And I hope to be able to make the experience better for others. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is reminding neurodivergent individuals and their parents that they're the experts in their own lives, you know, and they have every right and every expectation that should have an expectation that they can advocate for themselves. I'm not an expert in your child, and neither is any professional that you ever encounter with your journey. They might be experts in their specific fields of knowledge, but you know yourselves and your kids best. So if anything I say doesn't resonate with you today, or if you have different views or practices or opinions, just choose what is of value and throw away the rest. And before I hand over to Ruth, I'd really like to touch on language because in recent years, the person first language has been very popular. For example, a person with autism or a person with ADHD. But the feedback that I generally get from my clients is that they prefer the straightforward descriptors like autistic person or autist. So that's what I'm going to use. It's not meant to categorize or dismiss or belittle anyone. And if it's not your preference, I apologize. And that's all I have to say for right now. So Ruth,
Okay.
over to you.
Okay, thanks. Awesome. So my name is Ruth Germo. I've been a tutor for about 30 years. And for the last 1 year, I've worked here at alongside you. So it's been really interesting to get to know the other counselors. And because my field has always just been academics and mostly math, but some English and humanities, socials, even science, depends on the case. And what I love to do is help kids succeed. And often if they have some anxiety well, if they're not understanding math, for example, that's going to cause anxiety, and then that affects the rest of their whole school experience because they feel like they're failing at math, and it's like this weird language that they don't get. So I just love to help them overcome these hurdles and build their confidence so that they can succeed in school. And once they are overcoming hurdles, then that confidence spreads to the rest of their whole school experience. So it's awesome to see how building confidence can empower kids.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide.
So let's just take a quick look at what we're going to cover here today. So we want to talk about key differences between elementary and secondary school. We're going to review what neurodivergency is. We're going to talk about specific skills that are needed, some challenges and how to meet them, and how roles change, the roles of the students and the roles of the teachers change also, and the roles of the parents. And so just navigating some of that. And then we're going to look at some practical tips for studying, organizing, dealing with anything like ADHD, things like that. And at the end, we're going to give an opportunity for some Q&A. So remember your questions, and we'd like to talk about them at the end. So we're going to start with just talking about these key differences here. So you know what, you guys are the experts.
And I'm going to try something next level difficult for me, which is to switch onto the whiteboard.
So we're going to collect your ideas. And Fiona's going to write them down.
I'm going to write them down. I'm going to try.
See what happens.
Yeah. All right. So this is differences, right?
Differences between elementary school and high school. So what comes to your mind when you think about these differences? What are some that you are aware of? Now, do we need
Okay,
to...
did I miss at the beginning, guys? Is there a way to type in our answer, or are we just responding
No,
verbally?
sorry. I'm gonna try typing it in as you answer. If you can give us your join in and give us your answers, then we'll try and add
I
them.
know for my kiddos, one of the big differences is going to be the size of the school. Just the number of kids, the size, all that good stuff.
This is where you realize that I can't type without my better glasses.
Oh,
Okay. Anything else?
What else comes to mind?
I don't want to hog it, but also for us, the number of teachers they'll have to be dealing with.
That's definitely something that we'll be touching on later.
Number of transitions that they have to do throughout the day.
Right.
Right. Anything else burning a question hole in your brain right now?
There's also like the social aspect as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll be glad to know that while we don't have any answers for these, we do have some suggestions, and we will be touching on, I think, pretty much all of this, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So did you have any other things to add there?
Well, some of the things that there's more of is lots of those things are more items.
Yeah.
Right there. There's also more sensory stimulation. There's more going on, more to process. There's more freedom that kids have. And then also along with that, there's more responsibility.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
So this is all kind of more.
These are mores. Yeah. Some lessons later.
Okay. All right. What about
and one more is that these things can all lead to more anxiety.
Okay. That's a good point. So let's get on to the lesses. Anything that you feel there's less of?
Yeah. Any ideas from you? What will there be less of?
Less supervision.
Yeah.
Kind of along with that is less guidance. Navigating.
I was going to say communication
right
with the teachers.
from teachers. Is that right?
For us both ways, because I
Oh.
communicate lots to them and they do to
Mhm.
me.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. And so, well, maybe we should get moving along. So I'll just finish my list here. So there's less of a warm, cozy atmosphere like you have in elementary school. Just need some water.
I'm going to put that down as warm and fuzzies. Okay.
And one last thing was, well, I think we've touched on this. There's less structure and less
Mhm.
predictability.
I think predictability is a great way of putting it. Okay, so hopefully we'll have something that can be useful on that. And now I'm going to do the next amazing feat and go back to our presentation.
Yes.
Wow. Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, so a very quick review of neurodivergency, and my computer's decided to stick right now, but we all yeah, no, it's okay. Just trying to pull up my slide and my notes. So, you know, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this. You guys know this as well as or better than we do. But I love to point out, especially when I'm talking to teachers and others, youth leaders, family members, community members, that when we're talking about the umbrella of neurodiversity, we're talking about differences in the neurological systems of that individual. What we're not talking about is a behavioral disorder. And that's a really important point to make, because we're all aware that living with these disorders can lead to a lot of behavioral problems, but it's important for people dealing with our kids to understand that none of this is, you know, deliberately oppositional, none of it's lacking in respect, none of it's, you know, anything else but dealing with a brain that works differently. And as for Ruth and I, we are a counselor and a teacher. We're not occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, or behavioral consultants. And our presentation tonight is going to be slanted towards our specialties. But from the point of view that how someone functions in the world is a reflection of how they feel about themselves, we both have experience in guiding young people through that particular maze. There's a well-known psychologist called Albert Banduras, and his ideas on self-efficacy, or how we feel ourselves about our ability to cope in the world, they're really important here. In fact, there's been fairly recent research from LeBron Cruz and Orville that states that knowing about their own neurodivergence and understanding that it's an essential part of who they are can actually serve as a protective factor for our kiddos and their well-being. We've tried not to use too many academic quotes in this presentation, but I think it's important to have a few to show that we can back up what we're saying. If it's a personal point of view, we'll make that clear, and there will be a list of references at the end just for you. So it's also worth pointing out that the kind of typical neurodivergent student, as if there is such a thing, that we're going to be talking about is probably has autism spectrum disorder, may have ADHD, may have both. So that's, you know, kind of where we're coming from. All right, let's move on.
Well, those books sound really fascinating, and good to know that we'll find out.
We'll find out more.
What they
So,
are
you know,
in.
this list here is by no means exhaustive. One thing that's maybe a more recent development is the idea of acquired neurodivergence. The ones that all that come above there are things that people are born with. The acquired neurodivergence, which would be traumatic brain injury, functional neurological disorder, childhood PTSD, can end up having effects on the brain that can mimic neurodivergence or become neurodivergence in their own right. So that's all I have to say about that one.
Interesting. Okay, so
I wonder if we can move this over a bit.
we're going to look at some of these ways that some of the stress factors that are part of going to high school for kids who learn and think differently, and then look at some protective factors too. So one of the stress factors, and in all of these, we're going to look at ways that parents can help to be emotional regulators for their kids, to provide emotional regulation when these things can dysregulate them. So the first one is there's commonly a fear of failure, because they have kids with a neurodivergency often come to high school with a history of setbacks. So they've struggled academically already. Now they know it's going to be getting harder. And so they have a fear of failure. So one thing that parents can do, and other key adults in their life, grandparents, aunts and uncles, whatever, they can remind them of their strengths and their progress, because obviously they've all made a lot of progress and they all have some strengths. They can look at, where do they experience success, and just provide that stabilizing confidence in their ability. Another stress factor is the tougher academics. So they know things are going to be getting harder. And so it's something that parents can do there is remind them of the support that they have at home and at school. So they probably are in some special programs. Maybe they have an EA or an assistant of some kind, or they're in a program like SLP, and just to remind them of how things are in place for them, and at home, remind them of your support, and just encourage them and support them in learning how to reach out for help, to recognize when they need help, and to proactively reach out. And that's part of self-advocacy, which we're going to talk about a bit more later too. And then here's a great question. So we have a colleague who is, her name is Tracy, and she's a child and youth worker in the school system. And she brought up this point: who are their trusted adults at school? So these could be teachers, EAs, counselors.
Child and youth mental health workers.
Thank you. And to help their kids identify them, find 2 or 3 that they feel safe with, that they can have a supportive relationship with. Another fear or stress factor is the responsibilities that are going to be increasing. So,
is that something that you would like me to speak to?
Oh yes,
or is
I
that
would.
something that you would? Okay.
I would indeed, because I just noticed that I ran out of notes.
Yeah, I put these ones
Those
in.
are
Okay.
your things.
So for me, the best way to handle those increased responsibilities is to make sure that we accommodate our kids up to the max. Why would we not, accommodate them? Why would the schools not accommodate them? This is setting them up for success. If they need an accommodation, they should have it. They have the responsibility to do their best, but in order for them to do their best, we have to set them up to do that best. So that's giving them opportunities for success. They can have the responsibility and the weight of this new venture on them, but we have to make sure that they're optimized. And again, I think that Ruth mentioned this a little bit earlier about freedom. With increased responsibilities comes increased freedom. Maybe they are working their way up to practicing their social skills in different ways, going out to DQ after school with friends. We're gonna jump up and down and do the happy dance when that happens, even though we're dying inside and super anxious about how they're going to manage everything. We're going to encourage that, we're going to support them, and we're going to help them to understand that these increased responsibilities come with some perks as well. Right? So
Yeah,
back to you.
for sure. Okay, and then another area they can be anxious about is uncertainty about the future. And so we can remind them that is normal. That's normal for everybody. And that a cool thing to think about is that there are many ways to thrive and be happy, and it doesn't all have to look the same. So we can talk about different ways to define success. And I really love this point, to talk about different paths to consider, including careers for kids who don't want to sit at a desk. So that might go hand in hand with being, challenged by academics. Maybe they don't want to sit at a desk and do academic type things all day. And there's so many other ways, so many other paths to pursue, and where they can thrive actually. So it's great to look into those things.
And we were talking about this a little bit the other day, weren't we? And I saw a lovely TED talk from Sir Ken Robinson. I should have added that in. I'll maybe add it in before we send things out to you. And it was saying that, right now, the process of going through school, the end result is supposed to be a whole bunch of academics. But we're not all going to be academics. That's not really what works for everyone.
Mhm.
So when we have a little client who's around about 10 years old, who's telling me how stupid he is and how stupid he feels in school, but can strip down a motor engine and put it back together,
Right.
I got to wonder,
Mm.
what are we setting that kid up to expect, and what's important, and how are we celebrating his successes, and giving him opportunities to define things differently and giving him different paths to follow.
Mhm.
Um,
So true. Here's where I wanted to talk about a former
Yes,
student of
please.
mine.
Please.
So he was gracious to answer this question. He's 26 now. And so I tutored him actually from grade 4 up until grade 10 when I moved away. And so I was with him during that transition from elementary to high school and saw some of his anxieties. And so I just asked him, what would he have valued? What was hard about that transition? What would he have valued as a support? So he said, actually, I would like to read you his answer. He said, as for your question, it is definitely a complicated time for any kid leaving elementary school, going into high school. For me, I'd have to say the biggest challenge was challenges I was encountering were social. I never truly felt comfortable being myself, causing me to become depressed, which then impacted all aspects of my life, including learning at school. Additional factors that made that time more challenging were my parents' recent separation and me not being the most neurotypical kid. So he was aware of that. Public schools have so many cracks that any normal kid can fall into, let alone ones that are at a slight disadvantage. So it was a very stressful time for him, and it affected him socially and academically. And he said, here's a really interesting point he made, that if someone had shown me what my learning style was, I think I would have succeeded way more. So in addition to all these other things we've talked about, kids have different learning styles. So he said, there's tactile and there's visual and there's audio. So, and he said he's not a visual learner. So just here, reading the notes and all that didn't work for him, but he's more tactile. He liked to have his hands on. He's one of these guys who would have been taking a motor apart. He ended up becoming an engineer. So he's using those skills. He also said, if you're just a heads up for parents, the transition is stressful, but if your kids are still exhibiting stress and maybe some depression after a normal time, like a few months, then definitely look into it, maybe get their learning style tested, see if they have any other diagnoses, or maybe find some counseling for them if it's lasting too long.
So he definitely felt that extra level of support would have been helpful for him.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
He felt
super
like
good to know.
he fell through the cracks at his
That's a shame.
school.
I'm glad that he rose back up through them eventually, like
Yeah.
a flower pushing through
Yeah.
through concrete.
Yeah.
Okay. So come on, you can do this.
Yeah. There it is.
So Ruth, I'm going to let you take the lead on this one as well.
Okay, so I found this cool visual. I apologize that I did find a few typos in there, but I wanted to use this one anyways because I like how it's presented. So this is just a review of executive functions. So there's 8, but we've added one more that's not on here. And so people with ADHD can have challenges in the area of executive functions.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any type of neurodivergency or any diagnosis in that umbrella that doesn't have some challenges with some aspect of executive functioning.
Right. Yeah. So this will just be a little review of what they are. So number 1, it's the brown one in the left-hand side, is impulse control. So that's the ability to think before acting. So we can see how that, plus the next one, emotional control, which is keeping feelings in check. So all of those, both of those are things that would become more important and need to be developed or practiced in high school, where there's more freedom and more responsibility. And then number 3 says flexible thinking. So that's the ability to adjust behavior to unexpected changes. And as we've mentioned, there's a lot more changes and transitions and need for flexible thinking going on in high school. Number 4 is working memory. So that's the ability to keep key information in mind while using it. for more complicated projects. Number 5, self-monitoring, which is the self-awareness to how one is doing in the moment. And this comes up again later too, where encourage parents and the students themselves to be thinking, okay, what am I feeling right now? What do I need? Who do I need to ask for help from? And then number 6, planning and prioritizing. So huge in the new kinds of homework that students will be having. So this is to set and meet goals, even with that reduced support and guidance from teachers. Number 7 is, it should say, task initiation, the ability to take action to get started on tasks. And number 8 is organization, keeping track of things physically and mentally. And then the one we added was risk assessment.
Yeah. And so number 1, I apologize, I got these in the wrong order when I was typing them out because I didn't even notice.
Oh,
Because my executive functioning is so poor that I did not even notice the nice handy dandy numbers around the circle. So the risk assessment we could consider part and parcel of that impulse control piece, but it's so important with our teenagers that we help them to develop that risk assessment piece. We know that it's not going to really mature fully for a neurotypical or an autistic individual until probably age 25. For our kiddos, we can say probably 27, 28 before they're fully able to take on, consider, and make choices based on risk, but we can start helping them to develop those skills as early as possible. Okay, another one, barriers to success. So again, we're gonna allow an option to try and get some input from you. Okay, and because I can only use the same, no, it's not going to let me use this again. Oh, look at that. That's so helpful. All right, so barriers to success. Okay, and if you want to unmute and give me your best ideas on that, that would be great. I can also give you some starters if you'd like. For example, how to find everything. We can see that with looking back on that, on those executive functions, we can say that that's dealing with working memory. It's dealing with planning, organization, and flexible thinking. You know, maybe making new friends. Oh my goodness. I'm learning how to type too. Would involve emotional control, impulse control. Your jacket's ugly is not really going to make you new friends. But having the control to say, people like it when they get complimented, not when I say what I think, is maybe a good thing. Task initiation, how do I go up and introduce myself to a new person? Flexible thinking, and self-monitoring. Does anybody else have some suggestions of barriers to success that we could look at from the point of view of that list of executive functions? Oh, everybody's gone shy. Or is it that you can't unmute? I'm wondering. Carly, can you try unmuting and just
You're doing great. It sounds great, ladies.
It
I
sounds
think
great.
you've got it covered. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank
All right. So, you know, another one that I thought up was homework demands. And that would involve organization, planning, prioritizing, impulse control, because I need to sit down and do my homework and not scroll on social media for 3 hours. Task initiation, which is a huge issue for a lot of neurodivergent people, especially ADHD. So you know, we can think of a lot of things in terms of that. Anything from anybody else before we keep on moving?
Time management.
Time management, I love that. Yep. Phenomenal, thank you. Anything else? Okay, well, we might encounter a few more as we go along. And one more time back to our. Great. Okay. So I'm gonna see if I can minimize these again. And over to you, Ruth.
Okay, so here we're going to talk a little bit about some skills for managing schoolwork. And so we need things like organizing, planning, and recording. And so Fiona and I found some cool things online. There's a tool called goblin.tools, full of very cool ideas on and helpful actual apps to use for organizing homework and also organizing your schedule. So I wasn't able to take a screenshot and show you, but we got this one here. It's called the estimator, and it prompts students through this task of getting organized. So just tell me how long this is probably going to take. And I can't actually see this.
Oh, it says I said getting ready for school, and it said estimated 30 minutes to an hour. So with a tool like this, what you can do is you can put in how do I as well. How do I get ready for school? It will break it down. You can break down any of those points into smaller tasks and smaller tasks. So we're doing that, reducing things to the smallest possible step, those teeny tiny turtle steps. There are also options there that you can just do a brain dump and it'll make it into a to-do list, which maybe that would be a strategy to use for trying to write a paper. You get all your ideas down, it organizes it into some kind of to-do list.
I love that, the brain dump. Like
The brain
often
dump.
it feels like that's what's in my head is something I just need to dump this out, and it turns it into to-do list,
Exactly.
and you can make your way through. I heard
Exactly.
something very cool about to-do
Yeah.
lists, and that you get the same amount of dopamine if every time you check something off, whether it's a big thing or a small thing.
100%. Yes.
So it's very smart to break things down into small
Yeah.
tasks, and then you get to check off like 10 things instead of one thing. You get
100%. That is
10
a really, really good, yeah.
10 doses of dopamine right there.
Well remembered. Thank you. Okay, so I mean that's just one of many different apps, and there's so many different ones available.
And they're fun
now.
for kids to use.
Let me just see if I had another one in there to talk about.
They
Yeah.
make it fun for students instead of feeling like, oh, I'm overwhelmed and failing at this.
Okay. So we also had you also had some ideas about organizing, I think.
Well, I the next slide I have is for note taking.
No, I've got some notes there that suggest that you know, talking about what your kid's natural organizing skill is,
Okay,
building on that. So, you know, some kids like to micro-organize.
right.
It's like to be very detailed and have everything in its own little slot. Maybe a bin by the door is going to work better for some of them. And maybe they need some support around that as well. Did you, I think we had some more apps and things and suggestions for that coming up a bit later on.
So yeah, I know I had that bin by the door thing later too, but that's a great point to make, is that you know, kids are going to be facing bigger challenges, but they've already demonstrated some preferences that they have. Like, do they like to micro organize and or do they like to color code things, or do they want like just one place to collect things? You can kind of take note of what your kid's style and work with that and build on that to help them.
And accommodating their neurotype and working with their neurotype is going to be 100% more effective than trying to work against it. So, you know, there's this three big concepts that we have to help them wrap their heads around when it comes to managing their schoolwork. You know, they've got to organize things, they've got to plan for things, which is a little bit different than organizing, and they have to record things appropriately, get the information from school to home, you know, all that kind of thing. So again, we might have some more suggestions on that later on. We're teasing you to make sure that you stay till the end.
So, and then of course, note taking is a big deal for high school. So here's some alternatives. If your child doesn't like just taking notes, you can try different things, like put things in bullet points or bullet journaling. And then you might want to make things visual by taking doodle notes or color coding.
Love that. Doodle notes is actually something I still use
Oh,
even today.
you found
Yeah.
it effective. You
very.
discovered it and
I did.
you love it. And then there's mind mapping. So, and concept mapping strategy. So this can be very visual and very non-linear, just these, I'm sure everybody knows what mind mapping is, but to encourage kids to use that, if that comes more naturally than just your normal, regular, or what might be
Yeah.
considered typical note taking.
And it brings to mind that, if your kid is not a pencil and paper kind of dude, then you can also have mind mapping apps. There's also ways in which you can do mind mapping digitally. It doesn't have to be paper based.
Yeah, my husband has ADHD and he loves mind mapping. He also hates paper and pencils, like
Right.
just anything, get that away from me. But he uses all kinds of cool
Cool.
apps on his computer to take notes of things, and they're always very visual and interesting.
Mhm.
Another thing is you can make kids can make quizzes for themselves, make flashcards and review facts that way. And
We recently came across a
Yes.
phenomenal app for that. Do you want to talk more about that, or is that a bit
know,
later on?
Yeah, you know what?
Yeah,
Well,
we talked to somebody who's
Hey.
involved in the development of Brainscape.
Brainscape is what it was
Brainscape
called.
is what it's
Yes,
called.
and it's a flashcard app.
Yep. You can either buy a pro license and make your own sets of flashcards, or you can use it for free and utilize flashcards that people have already developed. And more often than not, you could say BC curriculum, grade 9 socials.
And there would be
there would be-
ready-made
Yeah.
set of flashcards for
Yeah.
you.
And so the idea with that is that very consistent with Ruth's ethos is that with that particular app, you are rating yourself on your confidence in the answer. So it's going to skew the reflash cards to make sure that the ones that you were least confident about, you're really rock solid on. So it's making sure that those foundational steps are met before you're moving on to other things.
And it gives you more reviews of the ones you don't know yet.
Yes.
They come up more
Yes.
repetitively until you finally really know them.
Yeah, and honestly, for our kids, especially ADHD, if you zone out when the teacher is saying that one, really important thing, you can really get stuck in terms of moving on to the next step and the next step, and it can really dent your confidence.
That's
So
especially true with math if you
Yeah,
miss some steps.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's our next one.
So taking notes by creating a slideshow.
It's really worked well for us.
Yeah. So I just this year had a student preparing for tests who absolutely hated writing anything, but was just such a whiz at making slideshows.
Yeah.
Just put this amazing homework assignment together in very little time because they just really connected with doing slideshows.
Yeah.
So and sometimes teachers will you can actually ask, can I present? I mean, mostly teachers provide options of ways to present a project, but if there's some way that you really like that isn't part of the list, you can ask. And that's part of self-advocacy. And often teachers will really welcome those ideas.
Okay.
And then color coding your notes. There's some very pretty colors out there.
There are. And that also goes along with your just making things nice for yourself and making things pleasurable. If homework needs a bowl of Cheerios on the side to get through it, then make it a positive experience. Have some positive associations. If getting the fanciest, coolest pastel highlighting pens so you can color code your notes makes your kiddo really happy, then let's Amazon, welcome.
Work with that. Compare your notes with a friend. So that makes it more social for people who work better that way.
Yeah.
Or you could quiz each other.
Yep.
And yes, also you can take notes through audio recordings. And I believe maybe number 9 is 2 apps about that. So
if it comes on.
There we go.
Yes.
So talk to text and Google Read and Write are ways to be less visual and more auditory.
And I know that I'm pretty sure that Google Read and Write is supported in some of the schools as well.
Okay.
Yeah. In case it doesn't come up again later on, I wanted to just I just had a thought, and I wanted to go back to number 7, compare your notes with a friend. Also study with a friend. Also prepare for tests with a friend. Do your homework with a friend. Body doubling, even if the person that you're body doubling with is doing something different and you don't talk and you're just sitting at this table together. Even if it's you as a parent sitting and responding to emails or paying bills online while your kiddo is working is huge. It's presumed to be a combination of emotional regulation and utilizing those mirror neurons that we all have when we see somebody, monkey see, monkey do. It's our monkey mind. And when we see people doing things, it makes it easier for us to get over that inner resistance and do the thing ourselves. So that's becoming really important. There are apps that you can join where you can join digitally with people working, and they do a 25-minute session and a 5-minute recap, or do some version of that Pomodoro technique where you do a set amount of work, then you get to take a break. Set amount of work, get to take a break.
That's a really good point about how, so my husband and I talk about this crossing an emotional hurdle. You have a hurdle against doing something. You don't want to do this project or whatever. Just by having someone else working on something in the same area can help you cross that
100%
hurdle. You see, that mirror neurons, like you're saying.
Yeah, and that's, that task initiation part of the executive functioning that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Okay, I'm up. So, sensory issues and distractions, we know all about these. I don't need to tell you guys about these. You are already experts, but there are so many different sensory issues that can come up in a classroom. Temperature, the sound, where the kid is in the classroom. Some teachers love to change seats, swap them every few weeks. That can be really distressing for a kid who has sensory challenges. Neon lights. I had a kid that could hear the allegedly electricity in the walls and going through the neon lights. It just becomes very difficult, and it requires a level of distress tolerance, which can be actually a double-edged sword. Stromberg et al., 2022, they found that the consequences of sensory and communicative barriers may go entirely unnoticed when autistic differences are not visible. So for our neurodivergent kids who have learned really well to mask, they've learned really well the social rules of the classroom, they've learned really well not to squirm or talk loud or notice things or say, Miss, I can hear the lights, they're at risk actually of suffering more from these things and being more challenged by them because they are not being invited to explain how these things are affecting them. So that is something that as a parent you may have to do in order to help them communicate that to the teacher if that's an issue for them. Distractions. Other people talking when you're trying to work. Come on, that's not going to work. A teacher getting a fact wrong. You have, we know a lot of our neurodivergent kids are super smart. It goes hand in hand. And having a teacher getting a fact wrong, especially if that teacher is not open to being corrected, can sit and fester in your kid's mind all that class, all that day, and can just like wreck their concentration for the whole day. Just asked my son, who is now a software engineer. However, we had a big spat with the teacher when the teacher tried to claim in grade 6 that the giraffe had a heart at its head and in its body, 2 hearts. And he found this very wrong, and unfortunately did not have the social skills to keep it to himself and bring it up later. So this can cause all sorts of issues. It's more tolerated in elementary school. It's probably not going to go down so well if they want to challenge the teacher in secondary. Putting your ADHD child, having them sit in a seat that allows them to see out to another place, out through a door, out through a window, is like putting me in a pastry shop and expecting me not to eat the eclair. It's not going to happen. And there's going to be chaos. So, if that's what it takes for you to ensure that your kid can be free of distractions, if there needs to be interventions, if you need to remind the teachers, if your kid needs to remind the teachers, or if somebody else that works with their IEP needs to remind the teachers, then that's what needs to happen, because your kid's ability to focus and hear what's happening in the classroom is more important, frankly. So that's where I come on that one. So the transitions, God, the transitions. We all want to know about the transitions. So it seemed to Ruth and I that we had like two main types of transitions going on that were distinctly different in secondary than elementary school. And the first one was, physical and logistical transitions. So quite apart from the emotional aspects, we're asking a lot more of our kids than they've been expected to do for themselves in elementary. Back then they had somebody telling them where to go, when to go there, how to go there. Now they have to carry and execute all that information themselves. And that's a whole lot of different things to figure out at once, quite apart from, navigating a new space, remembering to go to the bathroom when they get a chance, avoiding the scary giant grade 12s that are in the hallway. Yeah, well, and I've had more than one client going into high school this year who've said, the grade 12s, they're so big, right? So it can be a real thing. So they're having to remember textbooks if they're on an A-B schedule, which books for which days, and that is definitely a night before sort it out scenario. But what we can do is we can reduce the cognitive load on them by having a dedicated place, like a plastic pocket, or place in a binder, or even by them taking pictures on their phone, if they're allowed to have their phone, for anything that they're going to need to remember, look at later, get you to sign, anything that is going to be administratively important, that there's a space for that to go to. It doesn't guarantee that it's going to get there, but it makes it more likely. It can be useful to help them remember when they're getting used to these new physical transitions and these new bigger schools and these new spaces, that our brains have this incredible survival trait of making the new normal really fast. It helps us to normalize us in spaces. It helps us to get used to places quickly. It helps us to feel back in control. It's homeostasis. It's what our brains are designed to do. So, they're only going to feel new and weird for a little while, a week, maybe two at tops, and if you can, and I know that one of our attendees here has already done that, try and figure out what rooms they'll be in ahead of time. Try and get a plan of the school with the rooms marked, download it, print it, tattoo it on their forehead, whatever it takes, and try and get them into the school with time to acclimate themselves. And I have a couple of clients that are planning to stay behind after that first, homeroom day. The schedule, a friend in tow, they're going to go around, they're going to find where everything is, they're going to find out where the rooms are that they're going to be going to the next day. And it's not just, the classrooms. They're going to need to know where's the gym, where's the cafeteria, where's the counselor's office, where are the bathrooms, where's the library, all those extra spaces that they're going to have to know. And obviously their lockers. Lockers are a hot topic. It might be better to suggest on not relying on your locker for the first couple of weeks, just in case that just makes things more complicated and less doable. On the other hand, if you've got a kid that's just like bursting at the seams because they're going to get a locker this year, yeah, obviously we're gonna roll with that and make the best of it. Because you know your kid's best, you know what's going to work for them best. And so let's go on to the emotional transitions. Change is hard for all of us, and it's especially hard for these kids. And the transitioning from one activity to another and location to location throughout the day is going to be brutal for at least for a little while. You can use their interests to leverage better transitioning strategies. Here's an example in another one of those apps that we were going to talk about. If you have a kid that loves to check the boxes, that loves to feel that they're doing all the things and they're getting recognition for that, working towards success that way, you could use each transition as a separate goal. Use an app, for example, Thumbsters, which is a goal-oriented app on a phone. Again, if they have a device available to them. We're going to get to that in a little while. That might be enough to help them get over or feel better about having to undertake those challenges, those challenging transitions. If they can, maybe get them to check in with someone who can be guaranteed to respond. You know, if you've got a grandparent who's retired and at home and can be on call for those first few days so that they can text in between classes, doing okay? Yep, hanging in there, you know, something like that. You could also take the opportunity to have a loved but more neutral family member, like maybe a favorite aunt or something, take them out for, you know, ice cream, milkshake, fries, whatever, giving them the opportunity to talk about how they're feeling about all the changes without upsetting mom or dad, because we know that these kids are not lacking in emotion. They have too much emotion. They have too much empathy. And they know that this is an emotional transition for you too. And that you're invested in their success. So, you know, it might actually be that for these first few weeks, somebody else might be a better option for them to vomit all their feelings onto. That's not a great metaphor, but anyway.
It works.
All right. So, Ruth, you were going to take multiple teachers for
Great. So
or 10.
yeah. So big change is multiple teachers. So as a tutor, one of the things that I teach my kids to do is to kind of decode their teachers. And in elementary school, you have one teacher and they're working very hard to make it clear to the students what's expected and how to succeed, what success looks like. Whereas in high school, there's different teachers, they're teaching a wide variety of subjects. You know, maybe the math teacher marks very differently than the English teacher, and they're looking for different things. So I just encourage my students to notice those things, figure out the teacher. And oh yes, you are going to talk later about this rubric, or I think maybe that's in here.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so, and then if your student is being tutored, then that's really important information for the student to bring back to the tutor, especially any comments that the teacher has on any work that's handed in. If it's an essay or math, whatever, what are those comments, and show the, you know, learn from those comments. And it's not just, oh, I didn't get as high as mark as I wanted. It's like, what did the teacher say and how can we learn from that? Because that kind of thing is what they're going to be looking for in their next assignment. So, and as a tutor, I always want to see those comments, because then I can help them understand, you know, kind of how the teacher is thinking and how we can accommodate our types of studies and what we're doing together to provide that success for the student next time around. And yeah, so that can reduce confusion and anxiety by feeling like they know the teacher, each different teacher, and then also learning how to ask each teacher questions and learning to find out if they feel like they don't know what the teacher is looking for, then how can you ask questions? And if the student is not comfortable asking questions in class, then how can they ask one-on-one? What's the right path to take to access that teacher's time and find out?
Yeah.
That's part of self-advocacy.
Yeah. This is all coming down to a lot more self-advocacy for your kid, which is, you know, a difficult one to develop, but so important. And it's lovely that Ruth and I both have the same kind of idea about this, which is help your kid become a detective, help them to figure out those key points about those different teachers. I have a little guy who's a client that's going into high school. We actually made up a little questionnaire for him to answer about each new teacher, so he could help to get like a cheat sheet of how that teacher works and how he is in that class. So, you know, can
you give us an example?
I can.
Being on that questionnaire?
I can. So do they get mad if students talk in class, or are they pretty lax? Do they like people asking questions? And when do they like people asking questions? Are they approachable in class? Or do they like you to come up after or in flex time? Are they always there during flex time so you can come see them if you need to? Are they showing you that they're aware of any accommodations that are in place? And that might end up being more of a parent advocacy question, but you can find out whether if there's a clear accommodation in place that requires the teacher to be hands-on and more or pointing it out or making it clear, are they doing that? If your kid is good at art, maybe you get them to draw caricatures of their teachers, not in a mean way, just in a way that requires them to pay attention to some details about them, right? So we want to provide a way for your kids to familiarize themselves with these new people. And so you can also get a sense, but without you having to interrogate them about, well, what's she like and what she wear? Is she mean? So this is their deal to get to know these new teachers. You might have some discomfort around that. And I got bad news for you. That's your deal. That's yours to handle.
Oh, you're speaking to parents.
Yeah,
here.
I'm speaking to parents here. This is your deal to handle. It's not your kid's job to make you feel better about their school experience. And so a lot of it is going to have to be you breathing, listening. And if there's not something that urgently needs your jumping in there, you're going to have to.
Monopoly?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, but I don't have any cash on me.
Oh, I think somebody's mic's on. No worries. So, okay. So
And those things sound like fun.
yeah,
Like those
we can make
little
it fun.
rubrics, like questions to answer about your teachers. We kind of playing detective, like you said, or drawing a picture.
Yeah. And I think nowadays elementary schools are getting better at providing opportunities for students to get to know different adults during the school year. And it's a more populated classroom in terms of responsible adults with EAs and support staff. But it's daunting and it's going to be daunting, and it's going to be daunting for a couple of weeks, and then things are going to settle down. So that's another thing, this too shall pass. We're going to get through this. It's a bit more of a challenge. It's going to be great on the other side.
Yep.
Right. Number 3, this is for us both, I think, right?
Okay, yes, let's just check this out here. So, friends. Yes. So again, these are some ideas from our colleague Tracy, who it was awesome to chat with her the other day. And she couldn't be here today. Had some great ideas. And actually, something relating to the last slide that she said is that in elementary school, you have one teacher, and that teacher also has only 28 kids. They really can get to know each other, and the teacher can notice if any kids are dysregulated and know what they need and stuff. But in high school, you have more teachers, and they each have way more students. So your math teacher, for example, might have 120 students. So they don't have time to get to know each student in the same way that a elementary school teacher does. So that, again, indicates that the student needs to be more self-advocating for any help they need. And moving on to her thoughts about friends. So she said it's important to be purposeful, because again, you're surrounded with so many more people. So purposeful about finding classmates with common interests. So in elementary school, your friends are kind of picked for you. There are those 28 people around you all the time. But in high school, there's so many more people, and it's hard to navigate that. So again, it's like you could do a little questionnaire and play detective, look for people who have things in common with you, common interests.
Yeah, that a pin on their backpack that's from that anime show you like.
Oh, right,
that kind of thing, right? How do you decode clues about people?
Yeah. And then a role that parents can play is to support their child in identifying and pursuing interests that maybe go beyond school. Like maybe it's, anime videos, or maybe it's an extracurricular hobby that they want to develop, horseback riding or whatever, and then find other people who have those same interests. And that is one way to help find other friends that you can relate to.
Yeah, and those friends are not necessarily going to be going to the same school, and there's a bit of reprieve there from it all being school based. If they have friends that are coming up with them to high school, that's phenomenal. They may have to get better at sharing those friends with more other people, You know, that might be something that comes up as a little bit of a challenge. But, you know, making friends is a lot easier in elementary because it's more acceptable to come up and say, I like yogurt. Do you like yogurt? Let's be friends, you know?
Let's play at recess.
So, you know, it's a little bit different. So, I think Connor had some comments on this as well.
Yeah,
that
so
I think are really important.
yeah, that's true. So he was talking about how he was struggling in that transition to high school, and because he was struggling, he had more stress and more anxiety, and it made him feel alone and more alienated. So it affected his ability to make friends and to be, you know, socialized, to learn how to be in public and how to relate to people. So he was at a deficit there because of this undiagnosed learning disability and undiagnosed and unsupported anxiety. So again, his encouragement was to, you know, don't let your kids suffer ongoingly. If they're if like what decode, be a detective of your kid. If they have ongoing stress or depression, get it dealt with so that they can continue with these important tasks of adolescence, like making the friends. And
yeah, and it might be that you realize that that's the most important part about them being at high school, you know, more than the academics, more than anything else, is learning to self-manage a little bit better and learning to make friends. And, you know, maybe that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
Self-management, oh my goodness, this is what we're really all hoping that our kids will make great strides in secondary school. But this is a journey of teeny tiny turtle steps. That's
I
what,
love it.
yeah, Martha Beck, the author, calls them that. What tools do your kids already have in their toolbox? And how are they going to remember those tools in the moment? Maybe make sure that you review and emphasize the one key tool that they know that they can rely on those first few days. You know, whether that's 3 deep breaths before they do anything, you know, before they go into a new classroom, before they introduce themselves to new people, before they ask a staff member a question, they take 3 deep breaths, or something different. What you know works for them. Do they have strategies as well as tools? For example, do they like to choose a desk close to the teacher to help them hear and pay attention better? And we know with current research is showing that, for example, students with autism are less able to distinguish and isolate the range of frequencies that human voice comes in. So it's actually literally harder for them to pick out, hear, and understand what the teacher is saying. So when somebody is right up next to your face and talking and they say, I can't hear you, or I don't understand you, you're like, of course you do. Well, for an autistic person, that actually might be the case. So sorry, this is my newest soapbox. So, you know, maybe they need to sit closer to the teacher to help them to hear or pay attention better. Or maybe they prefer to be at the back of the classroom so that they are just not perceived. And that not perceived quality is something that a lot of teens, neurotypical and neurodivergent, have a real craving for. Do they have a check-in habit with themselves to help themselves figure out what's going well and what's causing stress? I've recently realized in my clinical practice that not many people do this kind of check-in. And if I had to choose 3 questions, it would be, and I think Ruth mentioned these earlier, is how am I feeling right now? What do I need in this moment to feel okay? And what's the next step I need to take? And that can be really powerful because it's mindful, it's grounding the student in the moment, and it takes the focus from the entire school experience, which is too much for anybody to handle, down to the one next thing, just the one next thing. And I think this is really helpful. It helps me every day. But if there's a particular area where you know your child has specific anxieties, and for me growing up, that would definitely be gym class, then you can do the technique called flagging the landmines, which you've probably already heard of. You're going to go through the activity with your child. You're going to figure out where the sticking points are, and you're going to come up with a plan. That way they're feeling prepared and their anxiety will not be gone, but hopefully it will be more manageable. And if they have a buddy in the same class or a helpful teacher who also knows a plan and can prompt them if and when necessary, that's even better. And that takes us to, the last point. In autistic circles, they used to call it mind blindness. These kids are not incapable of, but they are sometimes less effective on knowing what others do and why, and what they do and don't know, and why they do and don't do things. And elementary school does not help us there, because all these amazing elementary teachers seem to have like this supernatural ability to tune into their class and their kids and know what's coming next. This isn't going to happen in secondary school. Your kid is going to have to make sure that their teachers know the things they need them to know. And this is a twofer. You might have to help them figure out what's important for them to talk to their teachers about. Like, I can't present in front of the class because I'll have a panic attack and pass out, but I can pre-record it and play it on screen if that's okay. And also to help them figure out, and this is where my notes are just about to, no, my notes are not gonna help me here at all. No. And because I'm at that certain stage of life, I am not going to remember this on my own. So you're going to have to help them figure that what's important there. You're going to help them to figure out, the second part is of that is the figuring out what is an appropriate time for them to talk about it. Is there an opportunity for them to talk to the teacher one-on-one? Is there a way that a counselor or CYMH or somebody else at the school that's helping them to manage things can help to advocate for them if they can't advocate for themselves? This is to do with self-management, and this might require some steps of courage, but it's definitely something that we can build on. This doesn't have to be achieved on day one, but it can be something that we're working towards. Yeah. So I think our next slide is parents.
Okay.
Kiddos.
Okay, so am I starting with this one? Yeah, I think so.
Yep, I think you are.
So, again, playing detective here a little bit. So you want to play detective with your kids to find out how much support do they want from you? How do they value a daily check-in? And if so, what are some things you can do in that daily check-in? And so here, open-ended questions are useful. So, oh wait, let's back up a little bit. So we're going to talk about the role of parents in advocacy. So we've mentioned a few things like finding out when, as your child is doing this check-in habit, like what's the next step? What do I need? How do I play detective with these teachers? How do I ask for help? Sometimes it'll be something that the child needs to learn, and like you said, use some courage and develop these skills. Sometimes it's appropriate for the parent to step in. So just kind of things are changing, and just finding that balance, like where do I step in and where do I encourage the student to self-advocate. Something that came up again with this, Tracy, the child and youth worker, said it's so important to help kids connect with 2 to 3 trusted adults at school. And I love this. We've talked a few times, like who are those people that it might be? So it could be the teachers or a counselor,
It could be somebody at the front office.
That's right.
Or the lunch lady.
That's right. Someone that they feel safe with, or the school youth worker. But in fact, she said that in some schools, they'll actually do a survey and find out from each child who are your 2 to 3 trusted adults at school. And if their answer is no one, then they notify the principal because that child needs some extra support. I love that. And I just think that's it. I was never, of course, back in that day, encouraged to find those 2 to 3 trusted adults at school. I think that's really such a great a great
And
thing.
it would be lovely if we could sit back and trust that that is going to happen within the school. But maybe that's something as parents we're going to have to check.
Right.
You know, no shade being thrown at the school system here, but it's too important for us to rely and not double check on that.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So the daily check-in with parents, and like Fiona has mentioned, sometimes kids want their parents to just kind of back off a bit, like not be sort of hovering and worried and interrogating, but open-ended questions can go a long way. So here's some examples of open-ended questions, like what was the highlight of your day? What was the low light? So that allows kids to talk about what they're excited about. Maybe they found somebody that they have something in common with. That's another question, by the way. Forgot to mention it earlier. Who did you find that you have something in common with? Like just a nice, easygoing question that helps them think about that. Okay, so what are the highlights? What are the lowlights? And for the low light, what can happen to be supportive? What do you need to be supported in that challenging situation? And this leads the child to self-reflection. And again, what do I need? And who is the appropriate person to pursue this? Is it me or is it my parents? And yeah, so I love open-ended questions. They're great for all areas of life, especially for your kids in this kind of transition. And then another great thing that parents can do is to be aware of what programs your kids are in. Like, are they in Grad Quest or SLP or any of those extra programs, and to be aware of what specifically they provide. So one of my students has Grad Quest, and his mom said, yeah, he's got Grad Quest. I don't really know what that is, or I don't know if he's in touch with his Grad Quest advisor. And so, but that is really a great way to support your kids. Know what's available, and then just prompt your kid to make use of that. Yeah, what other maybe modified academics, just important things to be aware of. And then again, this has already come up, help your kids get as familiar with the school as possible, things like a tour. A lot of things are already provided, but perhaps you missed the tour. You can always talk to someone at school and ask for a private tour.
Yeah, you got a couple more days to get that.
Yeah.
Okay, in terms of your kiddos changing roles, you know, self-advocacy, we've been talking about this ad nauseum, but one of the things that they're going to have to deal with is assumptions, stigma, and stereotypes. And this this paper that I'm quoting here is actually sadly more about the assumptions, stigma, and stereotypes of teachers rather than other students. But you know, they might find that certain teachers assume that they can or can't do something, or you know, that they're going to be good at certain things and not others. And
that the kids are.
That the kids are,
Right.
yeah. So maybe that's something that they're going to have to deal with and address. Asking for what they need in terms of self-advocacy, if they need to sit at a different seat, if they need to be away from that really annoying kid that's driving them crazy, if they need to have a fidget toy, you know, there's something for them to haptic, you know, feedback or tactile stimulation. They may need assistance with learning to ask for those needs to be met themselves, and being aware of how they can appropriately do that, right? For a lot of kids entering high school, it's an opportunity for reinvention. And because of that, you know, some kids are going to want to be loud and proud about their neurotype and about their neurodivergency. And some kids might not wish to disclose it to others, might want to keep it on the down low, might want to just, you know, try fitting in more. And neither of those is right and neither of those is wrong. But again, I think the more that we can try and support our kids in their choices, we know that giving kids choices and supporting them in those choices builds resilient kids, whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical. So it can only really be a good thing. All right. I'm going to whiz through this because we're getting late on time and I want to have opportunities for us to ask questions. This is just an expansion of things you already know, practical things that can make a big difference. So, you know, The morning routine on the left, yeah, we all want that, even as grown adults. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen for any of us. But boil it down to the absolute minimum that they need to be doing to be appropriately prepared for school. They can use those apps like, the goblin.tools to help them figure out how long they're going to take, or they can sit down with you and navigate enough time, negotiate enough time for that to happen. It might be worth having a big piece of paper taped to the back of the front door with that don't forget on that first day the most vital things: the cell phone, the lunchbox, the keys, the noise cancelling headphones. Oh my god, can you imagine one of our sensorily challenged auditory kids going to school without their noise cancelling headphones? That would just be disastrous. So that's where you can give them a little bit of help and not be expecting on day one that they're going to remember all these things, but make sure that they have structures in place that will help them to start remember without you having to organize it for them every time. In terms of, going to a new route, a new school, and practicing a new route, this is something that, you can really take your kids' cue on. If they are really confident that they can manage this themselves and they want to manage it themselves, and it's really important that mom or dad is not taking them to school every day and showing up and dropping them off and holding their hand, then it's a negotiation. What is safe? What is going to work? Can you practice the route with them? Can you figure out all the technology that's going to be needed? How do they look things up on Google Maps? How do they work their bus pass? You can have an emergency backup plan. You can do it with them and then have them do it by themselves and be on the phone with them all the time. But your child might just need that extra help. They might want you to still take them, or somebody to take them. They might need that extra support. So we don't want to frighten them into not pushing themselves if they're ready, but we also don't want to expect more than they're able to give us in the moment. The food, we all want our kids to have this gorgeous Pinterest worthy lunch, and the reality is probably more like the center one, or if you're like my kids were, the one on the right, which was embarrassing, but they got to eat. That's more important. Again, these are things that we can work on later on in the school year. This is not the hill to die on in the first couple of weeks. Give them what they need, give them what they'll eat, give them what's going to make them happy. And if you've been used to writing them encouraging little notes, maybe ask them about that before they start high school. Are they going to want to open their lunchbox in front of other people and find a note from mommy or daddy, or do they want to play it cool? So just have those conversations. This is definitely my own personal opinion on this subject. For me, what I found to be most effective with my own kids and what I found to be most effective with other clients who are neurodivergent is to start with their ability and work around any sensory issues. Choose an easy hairstyle that they can manage, and they can redo themselves if they need to, rather than trying for something complicated that they're not gonna, this is not the time to try a brand new haircut that's short and then they're just gonna blow in their face and they're gonna have sensory issues all day long. Keep it simple. And then we get onto their preferences. Again, those guidelines come in if they still want the Dora the Explorer lunchbox. Are the other kids going to be take that in a wonderfully ironic sense, or are they gonna tease them for having a Dora the Explorer lunchbox? You don't want to shame your kids, you don't want to take away from their interests, but you can direct their preferences, shall we say, in a way that you think is going to be most appropriate for them to succeed at school. Nobody wants their kids getting picked on, but we know it happens. We know it happens. Bullying is not gone in our schools, and we have an obligation to prepare them for reality in as gentle a way as we can. And then finally comes the style and fashion and fitting in. You might want them to have the lovely new high tops. If all they're going to wear is the old comfy ones that they've broken in, do your best, take the magic eraser, clean the worst of the crud off and let them go. This is not time for you to have super pride and all this thing. Pride, snuck out the back door years ago, let's be honest. We can just, acknowledge that we got to do what we got to do, and that our kids being comfortable and managing is going to take importance here, priority. The fidgets and the jewelry all those good things are phenomenal. We can likewise make choices and help our kids make choices in a way that is going to help them fit in better or raise fewer eyebrows maybe. And again, I don't want to change your kids. Nobody wants to stifle them, but maybe, you know, instead of the pencil toppers that are chewable that have the dinosaurs, maybe we go for the slightly more aesthetically pleasing ones, or a piece of the chewable jewelry that looks like a normal piece of jewelry. Or maybe we swap that for mint, double mint gum, if the teachers are okay with that. And if that's an accommodation that can be made. Maybe shades that are cool could help them, you know, tolerate the visual sensitivities better. You know, if they need a stuffy rather than having a stuffy, can we get a squishmallow that goes on a keychain that goes on their backpack? Hell, I have one of those on my purse. You know, it's not noteworthy enough that people are going to comment on it. It's cute, but it's there as that piece of comfort and reassurance and sensory stimulation that they need. You know, and again, this is something that you might want to flag that landmine with the teachers and make sure that the fidgets and the appropriate tactile self-soothing methods that they have in class are going to work out really well. And from that point of view, things like, you know, on the top right there, you'll see a little tag that goes on your backpack. Those are great ways for people to figure out what your kid is into, which animes they love, which shows they're into, and that can really help to foster both their individuality and foster friendships and common interests.
Right, yeah. that's
So
cool. I like that one.
yeah,
Corner.
it's very cute.
Yeah.
So cell phones, oh my God, the new rules about cell phones do allow that students with disabilities, unique learning abilities, or health-related requirements will still be able to use personal digital devices in line with their designated support plans and IEPs. For me, this pisses me off a little bit because I think it's much more beneficial for us to teach all the students how to use their cell phones appropriately rather than just ban them from the classroom. And all this is going to do is that, you know, if you have your headphones on or if you have your cell phone out, it's going to mark you out as different. So I think on the whole, for most neurodivergent clients that I have and people that I know, having the security of that cell phone or the noise canceling headphones or whatever far outweighs any stigma or any difficulties they might have on advocating for themselves and say, no, I wear these because I need them, right? But it's a difficult one, and I feel like the school district, honestly, in this one, for me personally, has let the student body down by not actually engaging in this technology and making sure it's used appropriately rather than just banning it outright. I understand why they did it, but for our particular kids, it just makes things a layer more difficult. And so that's somewhere where you might want to step in as a parent to make sure, if your kid needs these things, that from day one, we don't spend 2 weeks figuring this out with the counselor and with the principal and everything else, that this is, you know, clearly outlined in their IEP, and they're allowed to have these necessary safety items, right? So that is taking us finally with, oh gosh, well, we're kind of at time, but we can go on a little bit later if everybody's happy with that. I'm gonna take us back to our full screens to do the questions and answers. Actually, before we do that, let's just quickly zoom through the last couple of slides, which is to let you know that you can get in touch with us here alongside you. We can definitely help you and your kiddos if you need it. Also, we would love to thank Andrew and Meg for facilitating this and helping us to put this together.
They encouraged us.
They did.
They did.
Tracy Mortensen is not only a child and youth worker in the school district, but she's also doing her practicum here to become a fully fledged counsellor.
It was very helpful.
Yes, super helpful.
Connor Dixon is that former student, now engineer, who helpfully and honestly shared his feedback.
Yeah.
About what the transition was like for him to high school.
And all you guys for being here. This has given us an opportunity to practice collecting this information and trying to put it into a useful a useful format. And from that point of view, we are going to be following up with some questionnaires for you in the
Yes.
next few days, which we would love to have your feedback. We would love to have information on what we missed, what we should have included.
Mhm.
Could this have been more effectively delivered? You know, any of those things would be really helpful
Yeah,
for us.
topics you would like
Yeah.
to see covered
Um,
in the future.
yeah,
if we
absolutely.
begin.
Because we do want to expand on this programming and,
Yeah.
and provide more in the future, I
Mm.
think.